And this is Mick, the Doctor of Digital.
And welcome to Music 101. Music 101 is created to empower music itself and legendary icon in the music industry. Another week, another great episode. Connie Francis dies at 87. 60s pop icon behind whose story now? And a pretty little baby, remember?
Yes, this is from lipstick on your collar to recent TikTok fame. Francis bridged generations of music lovers, and this is going to be in depth a little bit on her. She's a chart pioneer to TikTok star. It's a podcast where we can dive deep into stories behind the songs that shape popular music. Today, we're exploring an artist who's been having a major viral moment on TikTok, but whose groundbreaking career in the late 1950s and early 60s deserves way more recognition than it gets. She passed away, but it's an appropriate time to pay tribute to Connie Francis. So we can start with some of the obvious. Some of the younger listeners might know Pretty Little Baby from TikTok.
Well, thank you, Miss Connie Francis, for sharing your legacy to the world. And Mr. Mick and I are making our legacy too in the internet. So, what exactly was Connie Francis, and why should we care about her story?
It's a perfect place to start because Connie Francis represents one of the most overlooked revolutionary moments in pop music history. Picture this, it's 1957, and the music industry is almost completely male dominated, but Americans were ready to hear from the ladies. At the time, female performers were mostly relegated to jazz standards or backup singing roles. The idea of a young woman commanding the pop charts and building a multimedia empire, that was virtually unheard of. Enter Conchetta Rosemarie Foncanero from Newark, New Jersey. As I always say, a good place to be from. I lived there as a kid. But due to the prejudice against Italians, she changed her stage name, Connie Francis. She wasn't just breaking into the industry at 17, she was demolishing barriers that had kept women on the sidelines of pop music. Her father, George, a roofing contractor who played accordion, recognized her talent early and started booking her singing gigs when she was just 4 years old. By age 9, she was appearing on major TV shows like Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. Her breakthrough came with Who's Sorry Now, an old 1923 ballad that her father insisted she record. Initially released in late 1957, it seemed destined for obscurity until Dick Clark played it on American Bandstand in early 1958. The song rocketed to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100, making Francis one of the first solo female artists to achieve such massive chart success in the rock and roll era. But this wasn't a fluke. It was the beginning of a 7 year chart domination that would see her accumulate more top 10 hits than any other woman of her era. In conclusion, understanding Connie Francis means understanding how one teenager from Newark rewrote the rules for what female artists could achieve. And, to dive into the specific achievements, it's important for listeners to understand the musical and cultural landscape she was operating in. What was American pop music like in the late 1950s and early 60s before the British invasion changed everything? This is absolutely crucial context because the America that Connie Francis conquered was a completely different musical and cultural world from what came after 1964. We're talking about the Eisenhower era extending into the early Kennedy years, a time when American pop music was still finding its identity after the initial rock and roll explosion of the mid 1950s. The late 1950s music industry was dominated by a handful of major labels RCA, Columbia, Decca, Capitol, and MGM, where Francis recorded, and they controlled everything from artist development to radio promotion. The star making machinery was incredibly centralized, with shows like American Bandstand, The Ed Sullivan Show, and The Perry Como Show serving as the primary gatekeepers for national success. If Dick Clark or Ed Sullivan didn't embrace you, your chances of breaking through nationally were virtually zero. And that's where Connie came in. Musically, this was an era characterized by what we might call safe rebellion. The initial shock of Elvis and Little Richard had been somewhat domesticated by 1957. The music industry had figured out how to package rock and roll for mainstream consumption. Think Pat Boone's sanitized covers of Little Richard songs or clean cut artists like Bobby Darin and Frankie Avalon. The sound was pop rock with strong melodies, clear vocals, and production values that parents wouldn't find threatening. Teen culture was just beginning to emerge as a distinct market force. Before this era, popular music was largely designed for adults, with teenagers expected to listen to whatever their parents preferred. But the prosperity of post war America created a generation of teenagers with disposable income and distinct tastes. Record companies were just beginning to understand this demographic, and the infrastructure to support teen oriented music, from specialized radio formats to youth focused television shows, was still being developed. The recording technology of the era also shaped the sound. We're talking about the tail end of the mono recording era, with studios just beginning to experiment with stereo. The production aesthetic emphasized vocals front and center with orchestral arrangements that could sound good on both radio and the small speakers of portable record players. This technical limitation actually worked in Frances's favor. Her clear, powerful voice cut through perfectly in this sonic environment. Culturally, this was very much still a conservative, traditional America. The civil rights movement was gaining momentum. Female performers were expected to be wholesome, non threatening figures. Think Debbie Reynolds or Doris Day. The idea of a young woman expressing raw sexuality or rebellious attitudes in her music was largely unthinkable for mainstream success. In conclusion, Francis was operating in a musical landscape that was conservative, male dominated, and just beginning to recognize the commercial potential of teen oriented pop music.
Unthinkable indeed. What the legacy of Miss Connie. And Mr. Meg, the cultural context is fascinating. Now, you mentioned that Francis was breaking barriers for female artists, but she was not the only woman making music in his or in this era. How did she compare to other female performer of her time?
This comparison really illuminates just how revolutionary Frances's success was, because when you look at her contemporaries, the contrast is stark. The female artists who were achieving any level of success in the late 1950s were operating in very different lanes than Frances, and none were approaching her level of chart dominance or creative control. Let's start with the established female stars of the era. Doris Day was probably the biggest female name in entertainment, but she was primarily a movie star whose recording career supported her film work. Her biggest hits like Que Sera, Sera were tied to movie soundtracks, and her image was that of the wholesome girl next door, definitely not a rock and roll rebel. Patti Page had massive success with Tennessee Waltz and other country influenced pop songs. But again, her appeal was largely to adult audiences, and she didn't have the multimedia presence that Frances developed. In the jazz world, Ella Fitzgerald and Sarah Vaughan were achieving critical acclaim and commercial success, but they were operating in a completely different sphere from the pop charts that Frances was conquering. Their audiences were sophisticated adult listeners, not the teenagers who were driving the rock and roll revolution. These were incredibly talented artists, but they weren't challenging the industry's fundamental assumptions about female performers in the same way Frances was. The few young female performers who were attempting to compete in Frances's space tell an even more revealing story. Brenda Lee, who was actually younger than Frances, had some success with a rocking song like Sweet Nothings and later I'm Sorry, but her career trajectory was much more limited. Lee's hits were more sporadic, and she never achieved the sustained chart dominance that Frances maintained for 7 years straight. More importantly, Lee's image remained very much that of a cute teenager rather than a serious artist with creative control. Annette Funicello, one of Disney's Mouseketeers, attempted a recording career but never broke through to major chart success. Her wholesome Disney image actually worked against her in the emerging rock and roll landscape. Similarly, other teen oriented female performers like Shelley Fabre and Haley Mills had novelty hits tied to their acting careers, but couldn't sustain recording success. What made Frances different was her combination of teen appeal with sophisticated artistry. She could record a song like Lipstick on Your Collar that appealed to teenagers while also tackling more mature material like Among My Souvenirs that showcase genuine vocal sophistication. Most of the female contemporaries were pigeonholed into one lane or the other, either teen novelty acts or adult sophisticates. Frances also differed in her business approach. While other female performers were largely managed by male handlers who made all creative decisions, Frances, despite her father's control over her personal life, fought for and achieved unusual levels of input into her recording career. She chose songs, influenced arrangements, and built an international presence that her contemporaries couldn't match. The international aspect is particularly telling. Frances was recording in multiple languages and building global audiences, while most American female performers remained focused solely on the domestic market. This wasn't just commercial ambition, it was artistic vision that recognized music's potential to transcend cultural and linguistic barriers. In conclusion, comparing Frances to her contemporaries reveals just how unique her combination of teen appeal, artistic sophistication, business acumen, and international vision really was.
Mr. Mick, those are incredible achievements, but let's get specific about the numbers. When we talk about the chart domination in the late 50s and the early 60s, exactly what kind of success we are talking about here?
The statistics surrounding Connie Francis's chart performance read like a masterclass in pop dominance. And remember, we're talking about an era when female artists simply didn't achieve this level of sustained success. Between 1957 and 1964, she placed an astounding 35 songs on the Billboard Hot 100, with 15 reaching the top 10. To put this in perspective, during the same period, most established male artists were celebrating having half that number of hits. Let's break down her golden years. 1958 alone would constitute a career defining year for most artists. My Happiness reached number two. After this song, her next release, Stupid Cupid, hit number 14. Interestingly, the late pop star in his own right, Neil Sedaka, wrote the song. Not only that, but its B side, Carolina Moon, charted at number 12. The song was so popular, it actually did better in the UK and it was a number one hit. This was a remake of a 1929 song by Gene Austen. Connie was getting multiple hits from single releases, which was incredibly rare. 1959 brought Lipstick on Your Collar to number five. The song anticipates the 1960s bubblegum genre of hits. Her song Among My Souvenirs reached number seven with a tune that appealed to both teenagers and adults. But 1960 was when Frances achieved what no solo female artist had done before. She claimed the number one spot on the Billboard Hot 100 not once, but twice. Everybody Somebody's Fool held the top position for 2 weeks in June. Everybody is Somebody's Fool. Lyrics are amazing that are both teen oriented and adult sophisticated at the same time. But that hit was followed by My Heart Has a Mind of Its Own for another 2 weeks in September. This wasn't just commercial success, it was a cultural revolution. Frances had proved that American female artists could command the same chart respect as their male counterparts. Even as tastes were shifting, she maintained excellence through 1962 with another hit like Don't Break the Heart That Loves You, her third number one. Then Secondhand Love hit number seven. The composer and lyricist of the tune was none other than producer extraordinaire Phil Spector. She also released Vacation, which hit number nine. Her final tally, three number one songs, 15 top 10 hits, and 35 Hot 100 entries over 7 years. In conclusion, these numbers represent unprecedented achievement for a female artist in an era when the industry simply wasn't designed for women to succeed at this level, but the American and British pop audience demanded it.
Unprecedented indeed. Miss Connie Francis, thank you so much for your legacy. Those chart numbers are staggering, Mr. Mick, but imagine her impact went beyond just commercial success. What made Connie Francis truly revolutionary for her time?
Frances's revolutionary impact lies on how she fundamentally redefined what it meant to be a female entertainer, establishing templates that we still see in pop stardom today. First, she was a multimedia pioneer decades before that term existed. She didn't just make records, she built an empire. Her films like Where the Boys Are and Follow the Boys weren't celebrity cameos, they were starring roles that showcased her acting abilities alongside her musical talents, proving female artists could commercially be successful between media platforms. More impressively, Frances understood the global market in ways that seem prophetic today. She recorded her hits in multiple languages: Italian, Spanish, German, and French, recognizing that music could transcend linguistic barriers. This wasn't merely a commercial calculation, it was an artistic vision that expanded pop music's international reach decades before globalization became standard practice. But what made her truly revolutionary was how she broke gender barriers in terms of creative control. In an era when female performers were often told what to sing, how to dress, and how to behave, Frances demanded input in her song selection, arrangements, and artistic direction. This was unprecedented for women in the industry and established precedents that benefited subsequent generations. Her success also paved the way for future female pop stars by proving the commercial viability of female led pop music. The template she established: chart dominance, multimedia presence, international appeal, and creative control became the blueprint for female pop stardom. From Diana Ross to Madonna to Taylor Swift, they're all building on foundations that Frances established. She proved that female artists could be complete entertainers who commanded respect as serious artists worthy of long term investment. In conclusion, Frances didn't just succeed in a male dominated industry, she fundamentally changed what was possible for American women in popular music.
Definitely. It sounds like she achieved incredible professional success, but I imagine being a pioneering female artist in that era came with significant personal costs. What challenges did you face?
Frances's professional achievements came at tremendous personal cost. Much of her reveals the complex dynamics facing female artists in that era. Despite her success, she faced her controlling father, similar to Brian Wilson's dad. Her father, George, had been instrumental in her career, also exerting control over her personal life in ways that would be considered unacceptable today. The most devastating example involves her relationship with Bobby Darin. Frances and Darin were both teen idols, both successful artists, and genuinely in love with plans to marry. But when her father heard rumors about their engagement, he literally stormed into a rehearsal and pulled a gun on Darin, ending their relationship immediately. This incident reveals how even successful women like Frances face constraints that male artists never experienced. The trauma Frances endured throughout her life was staggering. She was brutally raped in 1974 when an intruder broke into her hotel room. Her brother was murdered in 1981, and she struggled with mental health issues that led to psychiatric hospitalization. Her father even had her committed to a psychiatric facility where she was diagnosed as manic depressive, and she attempted suicide by overdosing on sleeping pills. Yet, through all this trauma, Frances maintained her commitment to music and used her platform for advocacy. She served on President Reagan's task force on violent crime, calling herself America's most famous crime victim and working to help others. She won a $2.5 million lawsuit against the hotel where she was attacked, using the legal victory to raise awareness about security failures that endangered women. Her personal life included four marriages, with Frances later saying that only her third husband was worth the trouble, the others each lasting less than a year. These struggles underscore the vulnerability that came with female celebrity in an era with fewer protections and support systems. In conclusion, Frances's story illustrates how pioneering female artists of her era achieved professional success while navigating personal constraints and traumas that their male male contemporaries rarely faced.
Yes, and we salute you, Miss Connie Francis, for your resilience and continuing your legacy to the world. Let's jump to the present day, Mr. Mick. How did a song from 1962 that barely registered on the charts end up becoming a viral sensation on TikTok in 2024?
The TikTok revival of Pretty Little Baby represents one of the most fascinating examples of how music transcends generational boundaries. The song was originally released in 1962 during Francis's peak period, but it didn't achieve significant chart success, likely because she had already released several major hits that year and the market was saturated with her material. But in 2024, something magical happened. The song started appearing on TikTok with users drawn to its infectious melody and nostalgic production quality. Kim Kardashian posted it, Kyle Jenner used it in content, and suddenly millions of Z users were making videos with this forgotten gem. What made it perfect for TikTok was its upbeat tempo and catchy hook, which worked beautifully for short form video content. Plus, that vintage sound provided the perfect backdrop for retro themed posts. Here's what's beautiful about this moment. Frances herself, at 86 years old, joined TikTok to respond to the viral success. She posted a video saying she was flabbergasted and excited about the huge buzz my 1962 recording of Pretty Little Baby is making all over the world. To think that a song I recorded 63 years ago is captivating new generations of audiences truly overwhelming for me. The viral success did something remarkable. It introduced an entire new generation to Francis's broader catalog. Streaming numbers for her classic hits saw significant increases as young people discovered this incredible artist whose most music history books have overlooked. Users with no context for her original success were connecting with the genuine emotion she brought to every recording. The phenomenon demonstrates how great music has a timeless quality that transcends the era in which it was created. Despite being recorded in 1962, the song's themes of love and longing remain universally relatable, and Francis's emotive vocal performance still resonates with audiences born decades after the song was made. In conclusion, the TikTok revival proves that pioneering artists like Francis created music with lasting emotional resonance that can find new audiences across any platform or generation.
Mr. Meg, given everything we've discussed about her pioneering role and this recent resurgence, how should we understand Connie Francis' place in music history and her influence on today's artists?
Connie Francis's legacy extends far beyond impressive statistics to the fundamental changes she brought to popular music, and her influence on contemporary artists is more significant than most people realize. Every female pop star operating in today's environment, where women regularly dominate charts and control their artistic destinies, is building on foundations that Francis established. The template she created for female pop stardom remains the blueprint for success today. Chart dominance? Frances proved it was possible with her three number ones and 15 top 10 hits. Multimedia presence? She was starring in Hollywood films while maintaining her music career. International appeal? She was recording in multiple languages and building global fan bases decades before it became standard practice. Creative control? She fought for artistic input in ways that established precedents for future generations. Look at today's biggest female artist, Taylor Swift building a global empire while maintaining creative control, Billie Eilish achieving massive commercial success on her own artistic terms, and Beyonce operating as a complete multimedia entertainer. They're all following the Francis model. She proved that American female artists could be taken seriously as complete entertainers worthy of long term investment and respect. The TikTok revival of Pretty Little Baby serves as a perfect metaphor for Francis's enduring influence. Just when you think an artist has been forgotten by history, they resurface to captivate entirely new audiences. Frances spent her career defying expectations and breaking boundaries. It's entirely fitting that she would find new relevance in the digital age, introducing her groundbreaking artistry to generations discovering her for the first time. In an industry that often overlooks the contributions of early female performers, Frances's American story demands recognition not just as a successful artist of our era, but as a revolutionary who changed what was possible for women in music. The fact that a song recorded 62 years ago could find new life on TikTok proves that great artistry transcends time. And pioneers like Connie Francis absolutely deserve their rightful place in music history. In conclusion, Frances wasn't just a product of her era. She was an architect of the modern pop landscape that today's female artists continue to build upon.
Truly, truly a legendary icon in the music industry. This has been such an enlightening conversation, Mr. Mick, about an artist who clearly deserves much more recognition than she typically gets. Any final thoughts for our listeners who want to dive deeper into Connie Francis' catalog?
Well, if this episode has inspired you to explore Frances's music, start with those revolutionary early hits. Who's Sorry Now? Everybody's Somebody's Fool, Where the Boys Are, and My Heart Has a Mind of Its Own. These songs showcase her at her barrier breaking best and definitely give Pretty Little Baby a listen. You'll immediately understand why it captured TikTok's attention and why Frances's emotional honesty continues to resonate with new generations. What I hope listeners take away is that Connie Francis represents so much more than nostalgia or viral social media moments. She's a crucial figure in pop music history who fundamentally changed what female artists could achieve. Every time we see a woman topping charts, controlling her artistic vision, or building international careers, we're witnessing the continuation of a revolution that Francis started in 1958. In conclusion, her story reminds us that the most important artists aren't always the ones that get the most attention in music history books. Sometimes the real pioneers are the ones who quietly changed everything.
Miss Connie Francis, again, thank you so much for sharing your legacy to the world. And more than just a pop star, Francis was a powerhouse who mastered the art of heartbreak, transforming classic standards into explosive hits for a new generation. Mr. Mike, would you like to plug in something?
Sure, if you wouldn't mind, I appreciate it. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, GMick the Dr. Digital Smith, PhD, create a valued book in 90 days. You can also listen to the Dr. of Digital podcast, a couple of volumes on Amazon, Burning America, and On Track Ian Hunter.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Mink, the Doctor of Digital, the books, the podcast, and for sure more and more empowering books, episodes, as well as empowering authors to come. So please do listen to our baby podcast, Mental Health 101, because Mental Health 101 is created to empower our mental health awareness. So, Mr. Mick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, my friend, Mr. Daniel. Till next time, Deus Vult.
Modcom people, see you soon.